Welcome to the Counselors of Real Estate's Top 10 in 10 podcast series. In these 10-minute episodes, we'll discuss one of the prevailing 2021 and 2022 top 10 issues affecting real estate. I'm your host, Jonathan Schein, Counselor of Real Estate in the CRE, and CEO and Executive Director of the Real Estate Limited Partner Institute. The Counselors of Real Estate are trusted advisors finding solutions to complex real estate challenges. Experienced, innovative, and credentialed problem solvers, counselors practice in 20 countries and offer expertise in more than 50 real estate disciplines across all asset types and classes. Each has earned the prestigious CRE designation. I'd like to introduce our panelists today, starting with Cassandra.
Good morning. I'm Cassandra Francis, and I have a global practice in real estate planning and construction, strategic advisory services. I'm very happy to be with you today to talk about this very important topic in 2021.
And Tomáš?
Good evening or good morning. I don't know, but because I'm with you from Europe, we have an afternoon, and I guess that you have a morning in the United States. My name is Tomáš Ctibor, and I'm a CRE member almost 21 years from the beginning of this millennium. I'm privileged to be a chair of the European chapter, almost 3 years, and CRE European chapter. And I have my own practice. I'm a founder of a company called 4CT, which is the company oriented for urban analysis and urban planning and management of the urban development processes. So that's my core business. I'm on the market almost more than 30 years. So that's
you've seen a lot, Tomáš. That's for sure. So Tomáš and Cassandra co-authored the narrative supporting the number one issue in this year's compilation of the top 10 issues affecting real estate: remote work and mobility, which we're all quite familiar with right now. To review all of these issues, visit cre.org/top 10. So welcome. So let's start with the obvious. COVID-19's disruption over the last 18 months has forced our industry to recognize that the adaptability and resilience are paramount in real estate markets. Time will tell as to which space use behaviors will endure, as all real estate sectors are watching closely and poised to react. What demand-driven changes do you foresee in the desired use and location of space as remote work transitions to hybrid work models? Cassandra, well, let's start with you.
Sure. I think the paramount thing that we learned through COVID or any kind of large disruption like this is that spaces that are adaptable, flexible, and shareable are ones that are really going to survive the best when there's these short-term changes. Of course, spaces are going to need to be safe and clean. This is one of the things that the perception of the safety and the cleanliness of space is also going to be paramount moving forward. And lastly, in almost every property sector, increased amenities are going to be very important and are going to be probably the differentiators between a demand driven towards space of all different sectors. So, for instance, in residential, larger spaces with separable offices and home classrooms, that's still going to be a demand for a certain segment of the population. You're going to see in commercial space a very important need for the absolute and perceived cleanliness and safety within spaces. There's been a lot of reports of people who have returned to the offices not having seen that much of a difference from pre-COVID period. So I think that making sure that there's a very perceived difference before and after COVID is going to be very important. And certainly for healthcare facilities, educational facilities, time will tell once we determine how permanent all these changes are and indeed how the pandemic will actually change the uses of these types of spaces.
So let me ask you, just to double down on that, when you say amenities, would you say that health services, when I mean coming into a building, a residential or commercial, is that a new sense of security that people need in order to go back to the office?
I think it's very true. And I think that while I do not believe we're going to probably return to a 5-day work week in the near term, long term, maybe time will tell. And I do think that urban locations will be maintain their attractiveness for people. But in the current time period, I think things like amenities of options for parking, as people are more concerned about using public transportation, having amenities on site so people can feel safe within the building and not necessarily leave, but also having offices that are near public open spaces and homes that are near public open spaces where there's not the personal outdoor space is going to be paramount.
And Tomáš, how would you like to follow up on what Cassandra just related to us?
Maybe at the beginning, it's good to focus a little bit that the COVID has really significantly impacted the world's economy, demographics, and especially the human behavior in terms of how, where, and when we use the spaces. And I think that this is the main message from my perspective to us, that we have to start to think more significantly about the changes which are not new. Those trends or tendencies were here before COVID. But the COVID is, from my point of view, the unique accelerator of many of the processes. Because for example, all over the globe, we have the experience that the pandemic brought many different lockdowns, which really significantly slowed down nearly all people and even delivery of the goods. And we were from one day to another faced, how to react on that, and how, and many of the results of that we are not able to solve till today. If you look at the automotive production and many distribution of the goods, still we are on the results of the COVID. And what it means is that we really were slowed down, but in the same moment, many of the demands were increased very significantly. For example, the electronic ways of communication. Many of the companies, many of the sectors were relatively good prepared. For example, my own company, we use the Teams, we use all those applications, and we communicate through that tools before the COVID. But within very short time, global economy in many sectors didn't have any other chance. But it was not just the economy. It was not just the real estate market, but it was also the whole educational systems. They were from one day to another transferred. And for example, if we compare how the educational systems were prepared for such a type of situation, they were very compared to the business sector, they were very less prepared than the companies and private sector. In the same moment, we really recognize that the necessity and the need of, for example, covering by Wi-Fi connection, ability to have enough capacities in mobile networks. To be able to communicate not only for the business reasons, but also for other fields of our lives, like the education, but at the end also the entertainment and the private communication in between the families, because many of the families were split for months without any other tools how to communicate. And I think that the COVID was a test and a big laboratory. I know that it caused many terrible results for concrete people, societies, economies. But what I'm trying to do together with my colleagues to look at the COVID as an opportunity, which showed us where we have to a little bit focus more, zoom to some of the details, zoom to some kind of technologies developments or organization of for example, the work. As Cassandra mentioned, I'm 100% sure, and that was something what we recommended to our, let's say, clients. Forgot the 5 weeks working days, forgot the standard working hours. And if we look at that it's something what will be changed, especially in some of the fields of activity, some of the businesses, it will have, I'm 100% sure, it will have a relevance to the educational systems. Because if you look back, When starts the regular school attendance in 17th centuries? It starts because the manufacturing starts to grow up, and there was a need to cover the babies or the children when their moms were working. So, and if the moms and the fathers too will start working in a different, they will have much more flexibility. I do believe that it will have the influence to the way how we will organize the education too, and the culture, and the sport activities, and so on and so on, everything what is part of our lives. So it means that there is a real stamped result of COVID, that the hybrid type of work, hybrid type of entertainment, hybrid type of education, it's something what we have to have as a standard type of arrangement, let's say, of our activities.
You certainly make a really good point, especially when it comes to childcare, which is now back at the forefront of getting back to work or getting back to work in the office or any way to deal with this hybrid workforce. So on to the next question. After years of apparent but variant trends towards urbanization, the pandemic universally caused a movement away from urban cores, or so we think, particularly for those with higher incomes who could afford to move, and for lower income individuals seeking lower costs of living. The permanence of these movements may not be assured as once thought, and probably don't represent a true urban exodus. What are you seeing in your markets, and what do you anticipate nationally? Now, Cassandra, you're in Chicago, and Tomáš, you're in Prague. So you obviously, there could be a lot of overlap or none at all. So I'd love to hear from Cassandra first, and then from Tomáš.
Well, first, the housing market in the U.S. now is strangely starting to slow after record-breaking increases over the last year of housing prices, where one of the issues with the slowdown is I think we've hit these price ceilings where people just will not pay these increased prices, which in some cases in markets are 17% up. And the inventories over the last year were significantly down during COVID. And that's changing a bit now, too, because more people are putting their own homes on the market, and builders are trying to keep up with some of this demand. But now, again, that's starting to slow. And I think we're probably seeing a bit of a slowdown in going to the suburbs, just as prices have hit, particularly in areas like Chicago, larger cities, where the prices in the suburbs have been, homes have been selling over asking price. In many markets. And there's been a reduction in some of the costs in the downtown areas, which have caused relative bargains in some cases in condo markets. So I think a lot of what we've seen over COVID is going to change. The fleeing of the urban exodus, I believe that was probably something that's more short term, although the pandemic is looking like it might be a longer term situation now as well. And as people try to become more comfortable, particularly with the Delta variant and other potential mutations, kind of getting back to what is normal, people may continue to reside where they are now, particularly as they've spent such high costs for these properties. So the urban center, I believe, will always still have, because of the density of amenities that it had, it will always long-term survive. And I think there will be a pendulum swing as there's other local and global disruptors. But currently now, I think that you're still going to see a balance between some people moving back into the city or buying properties in the city, and the suburban markets slowing a bit just due to hitting price ceilings.
Thank you. And Tomáš?
So I think if we look at the Europe, there are really let's say significant differences between the United States or Canada and Europe, because first of all, and it's one of the drivers, the labor mobility in the EU has been rising as workers in the lower income regions migrate to the dynamic cities for jobs. It's the same in every part of the world, but true. But let's say we have a dynamic labor market with it's a dynamic that helps. Are in Europe homes for 20% of Europeans. So let's say those dynamically driven and increasing urban hubs where the Prague is one of them, are altogether, let's say, approximately 20% of the Europeans. And that involves only two European megacities, London and Paris. So those are only two cities which are comparable with the cities like in states like Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and other. Because the urban structures in Europe are much more based on a longer history and longer, let's say, different way of development, where, let's say, multifunctionality of the cities was historically built as a natural principle of development of the cities. The direction or the principle was a little bit influenced by Athens Charta when we started with different intensity, differently built the cities in especially 60s, 70s, and 80s. But it's all gone, and now the Europe it's back on their, let's say, historical fundamentals. Why I'm talking about it is that we have, in some aspects, a bit different situation. And I have the opportunity to talk with many of my colleagues during the COVID, that the situation in the city centers in Europe was different than in the cities like, for example, New York, because the people were still present in the cities. I don't know if you heard about the phenomenon, which was very typical during the total lockdowns, that the people were communicating from their balconies. In some cities, the people were singing every evening, because they were, and the structure of the city, the distances between the buildings, ability to touch the greenery inside the city, in the direct neighborhoods, was maybe much easier because the people didn't need, for example, the public transport, which was very dangerous and very, very restricted during the pandemic lockdown. So the development of the European city won't be so much changed, or the principles of the development, it's my opinion, won't be so much changed as a result of the COVID. Because we have another problem which we had before the COVID, and it's maybe one of those which would be accelerated by the COVID experience. And that is that because we didn't build in many cities enough within the, let's say, last 10 or 15 years, we can, if we look at many or majority of the urban hubs in Europe, the increase of the prices, it's really unstandard, and it's amazing. And the number of the people which are becoming out of the ability to get the apartments inside the cities because of the level of their salaries, it's increasing. And the only reason why the people are moving out from those let's say, urban centers is not because they are afraid of COVID. But this is the primary is the economical motivation. And if I look at my country, especially in the main city, big city like Prague, but it's not only the problem of Prague right now in these days. The group of the people for whom it's not affordable to get the space for living inside the city is increasing. And they are moving out, not because they are afraid about COVID, not because they are going to the nature, but they don't have any other alternative because it's a bit cheaper. And the results of that, it's really, really very important, and we have to be really very careful. What are the solutions?
Well, sure. And you touch upon another top 10 in 21 and 22 that we'll cover in another podcast. Finally, real quickly, as we're talking about remote work and mobility, and this is a very short question before we close. Cassandra and Tomáš, do you see a return to 5 days in an actual office moving forward after the pandemic?
I'll start by just saying I don't believe so. I think that with 70% of workers feeling that they are more productive at home and that they truly enjoy working remotely, that's going to be very difficult to attract those folks back into the office 5 days a week. One of the other things we didn't talk about relative, because we focus on COVID, is the millennial population, which is a cohort that is, a very large cohort. They're also just turning in their early 30s, so that they're going to be looking for their first-time homes as well. So separate from COVID, we have things like millennials becoming of first home buying age, and they're also a population that prefers not to work in the office if they have the flexibility of working remotely, but also things like climate change that are also impacting and driving mobility as well now. So beyond just COVID, we still have some other things that are really impacting globally mobility.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you. And Tomáš, 5-day in the office work week?
And I think we have to really accept that the question is if 60%, 50%, 70%, but I'm sure that not more than 80% of the people will be back in the offices. But the regime, how they will use the offices, will be different. And I think that the influence, and for me especially, the flexibility in planning, flexibility in building, in procedures, the flexibility in time, how to use the spaces we are building or we have under management. It's the key factor because, as Cassandra said, it's not only a result of the COVID. It's a problem that the people have a new experience, which they never had before. They were half a year, 1 year, 1.5 years at home. And they really, they change their attitude. Many companies have a problem. My own company will be not the same. We used the homework before, but we are using it right now more than before. What we learned also was that we work on international projects through the COVID. And we have the teams, international teams from United States, Italy, London, Czech Republic, with tens of people. And we never met in Rio, but we were able to work and we were able to create a concept for region, for example. And we were happy with results. And what's for me also a new experience, that we created new type of social contact, because I have a friend I never met, and because we have the same experience, because the friendship and collegiality, it's built on cooperation or sharing of the time, let's say, and sharing of the experiences. And all those aspects will influence. It's not just the decision of the managers. It's also a change of the attitude of the people, of the employees. And as Cassandra said, young people, but I'm not the youngest, I said at the beginning, but still, I'm thinking how it's more efficient to work. And for me, that experience with international cooperation, it's one of the positive results that I have a really more experience through the global cooperation, which was for all of us at the beginning the need, but at the end something what we enjoy. We are looking forward to meet in person. We promise to each other that one day we will meet and we will celebrate the cooperation. But we are happy today. We are happy that we have that opportunity. And that's something what COVID a little bit pushed us. And I think that we have to count that experience as something what will significantly influence how the companies, how the organizations will organize their way of work. And at the end, it will have the influence to our buildings and our cities at the end. That's my experience.
That's terrific. I want to thank you both, Cassandra and Tomáš, of Counselors of Real Estate. Obviously, the pandemic was a stress test revealing vulnerabilities, appetites, and new and increased risks. The 2021-22 top 10 issues are highly interconnected, as we found out this afternoon, and indicative of a changing and evolving real estate landscape. We're grateful for your knowledge and your contributions to this report. Join us next time for another discussion of the top 10 issues affecting real estate. I'm Jonathan Schein. On behalf of the Counselors of Real Estate, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Top 10 in 10. Thank you.